Good evening.
Good evening, Rinpoche.
And I'm really happy to be here. And so first, I would like to know how many of you have been practicing Buddha Dharma at this center? And how many of you are just really branded for this thing? Okay. Yeah. What's your name?
Logan.
Huh?
Logan.
Okay. Is this your first time?
Yes.
Good. So the topic is interesting, and also it is a really important topic. And we have been teaching this topic for a number of years. And also we feel the program, the teachings in general, pretty successful. At the end of the programs, when we complete the Dharma Confidence programs, individuals feel also really helped by the program, by the teachings, by the practice. But also, personally, I felt it really helps people to improve their spiritual path. So therefore, I feel it is a really important topic to discuss and to pay attention to. We all know the end, we all have to die. There is no way to escape death and dying. But the thing is, it depends on how we prepare to get ready to face death and dying. But the most important thing, what I feel to prepare or to die confidently, is to prepare the foundation of the spiritual path and practice is the essential thing. So therefore, this time we came just to have an introductory teaching how to prepare death and how to really build this foundational teaching and practice, and how to face death and dying, and also how to serve when we are losing our loved ones, and how to be there spiritually, compassionately. So therefore, what I like to say or discuss a little bit tonight is, what is this thing about Dharma? You know? When we say Dharma, maybe every single person have different definitions or different understanding of what Dharma is. So from Buddhist point of view, the Dharma is something to tame our mind, ordinary mind, violent mind, selfish mind, egocentric mind. So that is something really important to know have this deep certainty on it. Otherwise, our Dharma path, Dharma practice, is always contaminated by our habitual tendencies and emotions. Then the path of the Dharma will never be the preparation, the foundation, practice for definite Dharma. So sometimes we Tibetan Buddhists have this thing about like Bardo or death and dying, and it seems so interesting and so cool. And also a lot of Western Buddhists or spiritual people, because it's so mysterious, want to understand or have some curiosity. So a lot of people have some connection or interest to know what death and dying is. And I want to die spiritually, compassionately, comfortably. Of course, we all should, and we all want that. And also, we all want to be there for our loved ones who are facing death and dying, support spiritually. But the most important thing, what I think, or what I found, that we all need to focus on, which is preparing. Be ready and build a solid foundation. How to face death and dying. It's now expected. Living spiritually is the essential thing. To be ready to face death and dying. And to be ready to also use the after death, after inner death ceases. There are many processes that we are going to, or steps that we are going to face death and dying. And after outer breath ceases, things are happening, and inner breath ceases. So many interesting things that we can discuss, but we should not let our understanding of the Dharma live based on intellectual knowledge. Maybe intellectually we can have some ideas. Oh, okay. When Bardo of death and dying is happening, this thing about 5 elements are dissolving one after another. Oh, it makes sense. Okay, after that, this is going to happen. After that, this is going to happen. And intellectually, maybe it makes sense, and we may have some intellectual knowledge and understanding and a little certainty on it. But when we're truly facing those processes which is happening, like 5 elements dissolving one after another, and the outer breath ceases, and the inner breath ceases, Bardo Dharma, all those things start happening one after another. This intellectual knowledge will not take us to anywhere. So therefore, it's so important to prepare, to ready, not just to leave the understanding of the Dharma based on intellectual knowledge. Always need to bring that into emotional level. or experiential love. Embodying the meaning of the Dharma, the practice, what we are practicing every day. So, Bhakti Rinpoche, who was one of the really learned, educated, realized Nyingma, I'm sure some of you know who he is. He was the author of the Words of the Night Perfect Teacher. What he said to Tibetan people or all of us is, never leave the understanding of the Dharma based on intellectual love. You may use this intellectual knowledge to investigate or analyze from birth this life until enlightenment to find some intellectual understanding. But that understanding cannot help us to get through the bardo of the Dharma and after outer breath and inner breath ceases. So he encouraged the Dharma practitioners, make sure, live spiritually. That means live as Dharma, embodying the Dharma, whatever we practice. If we can really embody the Dharma, whatever we study, whatever we practice, that is the best preparation for death and the dying and the bardo and the next life. So therefore, I really do think, understand what is this Dharma? What is the definition of Dharma? In Tibetan Buddhist point of view, tending the mind. Dig out the root of self-attachment. That's the antidote. That's what we call Dharma. So if we can use Dharma practice to reduce our ego, self-attachment, identity, and slowly, really, find a way to let go of our strong patterns, that is the Dharma. Then when 5 elements are dissolving, or when outer breath is ceasing, or inner breath is ceasing, and then part of the Dharma, whatever appearance comes up, we're ready to transform. We're ready to face. So therefore, I'm sure you all know, this center has been here for a long time. It seems you have been practicing Dharma and studying the Dharma, contemplating on the Dharma, listening to the Dharma teachings. But the important thing is we need to review the beginning of our Dharma, journey of our Dharma path. Really important. Really make sure we're applying the Dharma as Dharma. As the Zangmo said, if we practice the Dharma as Dharma, then that path, that practice, that experience help us to liberate from samsara. And also that experience help us to serve others and also help others and help our compassion, loving kindness, bodhicitta practice improve. But if we just let ourselves become lip service Dharma practitioners, say I'm Buddhist, I practice Buddha Dharma, or I practice, especially it seems this is like a center connected with Gardhi tradition and the Nyingma tradition. I'm sure it's a Rime. Of course, Rime is wonderful, you know. And this Gardhi tradition and the Nyingma tradition, we have this thing about Mahamudra and the Zangmo. I'm not putting Mahamudra and the Zangmo down, but really need a good foundation, good understanding of the Dharma. And really need a lot of effort and purifications to reduce the patterns that we have been habituated for millions of lifetimes. Then, when this perfect cause and conditions and purification and all those things we can discuss tomorrow, devotion and all these things come together, there will be a really wonderful opportunity, not just understanding the Mahamudra and Topachempo, really we can experience, start to experience the essence of a Mahamudra and Topachempo. Of course, that is the quickest path. Whenever there's a quickest path, then there's a dangerous side, you know? We have to be prepared to take that quickest path. So to be able to take that quickest path, the foundation of the Dharma path, the practice, is the most important thing. So therefore, I encourage all of you to remind yourself, what is the Dharma really? Oh, okay, Dharma, this is the whole thing. Hundreds of thousands of collections of writings by Indian masters and especially Tibetan masters. And there are so many books that have been published in English language about the Dharma. So all those books are for what? For helping us to tame the mind. And to helping us to learn how to really transform our emotions into a path. So it takes a lot of effort and time to be able to really apply the Dharma, having proper skills. So that's something I wanted to bring to discuss this subject tonight. Dharma. Without the Dharma, there is no Buddha. How can practicing the Dharma, then that helps us to attain the Buddha. So Dharma is everything. So Dharma is not the object, the books. Dharma is the teachings can help us, tame us, bring some moistures or warmth into our heart. And helping us to let go of our ego and self-attachment. There are many ways to work on this, but we need to know really what really Dharma is. That's really important. Other ways, as the Gautama Masters said, we can really act like a Dharma practitioner. Talk like a Dharma practitioners. Maybe once a while think like a Dharma practitioners. But we cannot really embody the meaning of the Dharma. So therefore, this is something you all should think. And then also Allison has been teaching with me. And I'm sure she has a lot of interest I started teaching with her maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. We have been together for almost 19 years. So I have been watching. On one hand, she's my wife. On the other hand, she's my sister. And also the other side, she's kind of my student. So I have been guiding her and watching her, the way she progresses the path of Buddha Dharma from Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So I have a confidence in Western Buddhists. She improved a lot. So this is the first time you met her, but so it's doable. We all can practice the Dharma. We all can improve. We all can really build a solid foundation for our own death and dying and how to serve others. That is the purpose, the whole purpose to practice the Dharma is die peacefully, serve others. When we're dying, there's no guilt, no regret, no fear. That's the purpose of the Dharma. Otherwise, practicing that, what we can gain from it? Nothing much. But if we can gain from the practice of Dharma to be able to facing death and dying, and then next life and the next life, and also gain the skills to serve others, that is the most important thing we should focus on. So I'm going to turn this to Allison, and then she will say something. Otherwise, I will say a whole bunch of things meaningless.
So I really like that Rinpoche brought this topic up of what is Dharma, because it's kind of one of those topics that we can take for granted. We don't really check in with what's the purpose of practice. Why am I practicing? Is my practice improving? Rinpoche has always said to me, if you're a good practitioner, your practice is improving day by day. You can see a difference. And even if not day by day, maybe week by week or month by month. But definitely if we're taming the mind, if we have an understanding of what our Dharma practice is, we should be feeling motivated to practice. We should be feeling like practice really benefits me. And when Rinpoche and I first started teaching about the process of dying and spiritual death, it was actually by the request of many students that Rinpoche was meeting. So we had moved to the States, and Rinpoche was giving public teachings. We didn't really know any Buddhists, so just all kinds of people would come, people we'd never met before. But many of them would come. They had gray hair. They were definitely feeling like they'd been practicing for a lot of their adult lives. Some people said even 30, 40 years. And they said, Rinpoche, I'm getting close to dying. My friends are dying. My Dharma brothers and sisters are dying. And I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And for Rinpoche, he had a really different experience. I'm sure that all of us have. So this was really shocking for him. It's like, if you're a Dharma practitioner, how could you not know what you're supposed to do when you're facing death or facing death of your loved ones? Because the whole point of practice, from the point of view of Vajrayana Buddhism, is to be able to practice at the moment of death, is to face death fearlessly, to face death with compassion or bodhicitta in the mind. And so Rinpoche decided right then that this was going to be a main focus of his teaching. And it shows how, even though Dharma is trying really hard to take root in this country, and we're trying really hard, we're struggling to practice the Dharma, but we're just not getting all of the pieces. We're not being able to bring it all together. And if I had to say what is Dharma, there's a lot of different aspects of Dharma, but with relating to facing death, I would say that a lot of Dharma is being able to face the reality of life. Having the courage to understand that life is continually changing, that loss is happening today, at the next moment, and that when I die, I'm going to lose everything in a single instant. And how much courage I need to be able to face that moment and to remember to practice. So think about how we deal with difficult situations in our normal life. We have a small loss, maybe we lose our job, we have difficulty with a friendship, we have a small loss, and it's devastating, and we lose our practice, we lose our grounding, we're emotionally devastated, but the moment of death is not like that. If we really think about the implications of the moment of death, we're losing everything all at once, and there's nothing that can be salvaged. There's no way that we can fool ourselves. There's no way that we can, try to bargain with it, or there's all these traditional sayings about death, like you can't bargain with death like you do with a businessman. You can't cheat death like a gambler. There's nothing that you can do. And I'm sure a lot of people here have faced the death of their loved ones. And I'm sure that in the face of that, all of us have the thought, I wish there's something I could do to change what's happening, but when it happens, it just happens. And that's what all of us is facing. And we're facing it personally, and we're facing it with every person that we care about, that we love. So I would say, from the point of view of that, in our culture, a lot of the way that we cope with things is to avoid them. We think, well, if I just don't think about it, then, I'll be able to maintain my mind stability, or I'll be able to keep going, and then when it happens, I'll deal with it. But death isn't like that. If your goal as a Dharma practitioner is to practice at the moment of death, and you don't realize the moment of death is coming, how could you ever expect yourself to practice in that moment? How could that be possible? It doesn't make sense. So, for that reason, we have to actually think about dying. We have to think about the impermanence of life. And there's a lot of good reasons to think about the impermanence of life. Because the impermanence of life makes us nicer people. When we realize that things are impermanent, we can be kinder to other people. We're more forgiving. We're more willing to let things go. We don't take everything quite so seriously because we know it's changing, and that change is difficult for us, and that change is difficult for everyone else. I think that maybe all of us can think back to experiences that we've had with death and think about why being able to die spiritually as a Buddhist practitioner would be such a wonderful gift for the people that we love as well. So if we could practice ourselves, of course that would be amazing for us. It would be an amazing example for our community, our Sangha. But I've been thinking my mother, when my grandmother died, and my mother had such a broken relationship with my grandmother. My grandmother was mentally ill, and my mother was never able to really connect with her in a positive way. It was always fraught with difficulty and a lot of suffering. And then my grandmother got sick and she passed away, and my mother couldn't accept, that she had died, and she was full of regret and full of sadness. And still, even today, if she talks about that relationship, it's so painful. And for us, if we think about, as Buddhist practitioners, Rinpoche said, our goal is to be here to serve others. Even can we think about what it would be like to serve others by, at the moment of our own death, having peaceful relationships with the people we love and letting them have the ability to move on with their lives and not think, with so much pain and sadness about the connections that they've lost. There's just so many reasons to reflect on this topic and to make this an important investigation in our practice. Rinpoche and I have seen that when people contemplate death, that they become better practitioners. They become motivated to practice. And there is no other teaching that is as motivating as thinking about our own mortality. Or especially sometimes I think, for me, it's even more motivating to think about like Rinpoche's mortality than my own. Because I think he's the person I rely on most. And he's not always going to be here. You know, and I have to rely on myself. I have to be able to take care of myself spiritually. And all of us are in that same position. All of us, the things that we think are what are going to make us be okay, you know, sooner or later those things are going to be gone, and all we have is Dharma. And the Buddhist teachings say, you know, the only thing that you're taking with you is your karma. The only thing you're taking with you is your spiritual realization, your spiritual certainty. And so, if we're really thinking about that, we should feel a lot of motivation to practice the Dharma. You know, because if we don't, at the moment of death, when we're facing the loss of everything all in that moment, then what is it we're going to be thinking? Wow, I wish I had put more energy into practice. Wow, I wish I hadn't spent my life this way. I wish I hadn't just been so, you know, distracted by my emotions or whatever was going on in my life at any given moment. So that can happen to any of us. You know, it's really up to us if we're willing to face the painful realities of life. And life is painful. You know, the first noble truth, life is suffering. You know, the nature of this ordinary world is suffering. And it is hard to face that. But in my own experience, I think a lot of happiness comes from that. It's like it's something we don't expect. We think if we try to ignore those things, then that makes us happier, but actually facing those things can make us happier. So you know, the result of Buddhism is to have a lot more joy in your life. Because you're not always trying to make something be something it isn't. You have a lot more energy to be happy. Because you're not trying to pretend that life is different than it really is. So I don't think I really got to the question of what is Dharma Rinpoche. But, you know, I think this is something that all of us here, I mean, hopefully that's why we're here, is to think about, you know, what is Dharma in my life and how am I going to practice the Dharma and why should I practice the Dharma? And hopefully thinking about the experience of death and the impermanence of life is a huge motivation to want to do that. And it's a place where we can all gain a lot of energy for practice.
Mm-hmm. So, in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, especially yogis who practice Dharma genuinely, authentically, the instruction what they gave to the students, we call it Go, Nyum, Do, So. 3 things they teach or encourage students to focus on. It's about Dharma. First, as I said, need to understand what Dharma is and learn some skills and practices of Dharma, whichever Tibetan Buddhist tradition you connect with. You may connect perfectly with, it makes sense. Gelugpa tradition. You may perfectly connect with Sakya tradition. You may perfectly connect with Karya tradition, Nyingma tradition. Among Karya, Nyingma, Gil, Sakya, there are many sub-lineages, and you may perfectly connect to those lineages. Then the first thing, which is so important, is understand what the foundational practices. Using that foundational practices help us to get to the actual path of that lineage. So we all are different because we all have different karma. So therefore, we all have different connections with different lineages of Tibetan Buddhism or any other Buddhist traditions. But the lamas, the yogis, are encouraging or instructing the followers of Buddhist students. Goal is the understanding of that path thoroughly. Give this intellectual certitude of that path, of that lineage. Learn how to apply that path. Go new. Then not just leave that knowledge on the intellectual level. Apply emotion to try to experience, to feel the essence of that path, whichever path you are connected. New, experiential. Understanding have to come first. New is the experiential part. Without this intellectual understanding, what are we going to experience? So we have to have this intellectual knowledge and a connection with that path. Then applying that, make effort. Bring the teachings, applying the teachings more often. We have to have a very, very strong, diligent. We have to make a lot of effort to habituate another pattern, the opposite of our ordinary pattern. This ordinary pattern is so natural. None of us need to learn how to get angry, right? Have you went to a class to learn how to get angry, to learn how to get upset? None of us. We came to this world. Effortlessly we knew how to get upset. And then we got out of our mother's womb. We were yelling and screaming. We call it ghetto. Anyen. We never needed to learn. So we need to be really, what's the word for that? Honest with ourselves. You know? We compare that pattern we already have without learning, without educating. And then this new path, which is the Dharma, slowly can eradicate the thickest, strongest pattern. But this is so weak because we have to learn. We have to make a lot of effort. It makes sense we have to understand what is done. And then make a lot of effort to apply it. New, gain, reach that level of experiential level. It takes years to gain that or to reach that level. Then stop is the realization. Every those instructions by the masters of the old from Tibetan from Buddhist tradition. Understanding, applying, slowly gain the experiential. Then we can experience the glimpse of realizations of the path we're connected. This is the way how to live spiritually, or as a Dharma practitioner. This is the way how to face death and dying. Without this, really, it's going to be hard for all of us to die confident, to face death and dying spiritually. It's really hard. Just think, it makes sense, right? Some of you have been on this earth for enough number of years. So you have been working so hard to earn your retirement and make sure when you retire, financially you're okay. And also we know we are in the West, how much we make plans of this life, financially okay, or medically okay, and all those insurance, a lot of things. It makes sense. So we have to have some insurance to face that and down and get through that. So that is the Dharma. Go, Nyung, those two are really important. So we receive a lot of teachings because we live in the West, now modern world. It's weird. Most lamas come to the West and they give teachings openly. We receive so many teachings. We make so many notes. And then we go home. After a couple of weeks, we have no idea where that notebook is. That's not a really good way to apply the Dharma. Really need to bring the teachings, whatever you have been studying, often. Then at one point, really, we can apply the Dharma on the spot. When we're upset, we remember the antidotes. There are many different ways to apply the antidotes. We may have skills to liberate any kind of emotions on the spot as a Rinpoche practitioner. But it takes a lot of time to do that. It needs a lot of effort. So we really need to understand, oh yeah, this is what I call the Dharma, and this is the antidote to tame the mind and watch ourselves. Am I really improving or am I getting worse? Sometimes we find practitioners worse than ordinary people. They're more compassionate. They're more kind. So when we see ourselves like that, oh, okay, I need to put myself together. In Tibet we had say nomads, when we get hungry, there's no restaurants waiting for you, and we have to tighten our belts and put ourselves together and walk further and act stronger and not hungry. Like that. Okay, my Dharma path. I have been practicing for a number of years, but my actions is not improving. My speech is not improving. My thoughts are not improving. Be honest with ourselves and then really apply the Dharma and review the Dharma. So those, when you go to see those really old Tibetan lamas, they more often say this: oh, kid, this is the 3 things if you really want to practice the Dharma. These 3 things are so important to focus on. But if you're a young scholar and want to be smart and everything live in your head, then I have nothing to teach or nothing to give. But if you're someone who wanted to use the Dharma to tame the mind, to help others, those 3 things are so important. Apply the Dharma. So, also, one master told me when I was really young, we Tibetan people do not apply the Dharma. If we do, most Tibetan people can become really good practitioners. In the same way, in the West, especially Western Buddhists, you are educated. Not like Tibetan nomads, lay people. You know how to read, you know how to write, and you have been receiving a lot of teachings. Much more capable than Tibetan people to really practice the Dharma, because you understand the Dharma much more than ordinary Tibetan people. Tibetan people even say in America, but we're a little bit nervous to go to Dharma lamas, like Dharma centers. Why? Because Western people know Dharma a lot. When they ask, we're a little bit embarrassed to answer because we're not like that well educated about the Buddhism. So the thing what I'm trying to say is, we all know how to prepare that at Dharma. You all already learned. But the thing is, we all need to apply that, maturing that, improving that skill to be able to help our own selves and others when it's needed.
Yeah. So coming back to this, the topic of what is Dharma, so Rinpoche gave a definition. Dharma is taming the mind. And so we might think to ourselves, what does taming the mind mean, really? Well, one way that we could think about it, this is a really in our own language, it is the method for replacing old unhealthy patterns with new patterns. Right? And it makes sense because when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we see that we do a lot of harmful things. We see that we do a lot of things that harm ourselves. You know, and of course other people, we see our own selfishness. We see that we act out emotions, which not only hurt others, but, you know, the very act of acting out those emotions causes us a lot of pain. But we don't know how to change them. And so Dharma, if we're really relying on Dharma should be able to help us do that. You know, otherwise why are we practicing? Again, coming back to, if Dharma is not really helping us, then why are we practicing? And I remember one time Rinpoche was having a conversation with a student, and he asked that student, you know, what is refuge? And the student gave, I thought, a really good answer. And she said, refuge means you're really relying upon the Dharma. You're really relying upon the Lama's instructions and really trying to apply them. You know, and so if we think about refuge in that way, if we think about it as the actual means for transforming these really unhealthy patterns that cause us so much suffering, it makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't we want to practice the Dharma? And the Dharma gives us so many wonderful ways to transform the mind, to tame the mind. For example, bodhicitta, which I'm sure Rinpoche is going to talk about all weekend. Wishing to place others in the state of enlightenment, free of suffering. The Dharma gives us conduct to rely upon. The Dharma teaches us to act in accordance with others, like to put others' feelings first, to be able to bite our own tongue instead of speaking out in a way that's painful for others. We have the example of the Lama. If we're relying on the Lama, we have their example for conduct. We have the example of the spiritual masters. And all of these are the Dharma's methods for taming the mind. And then, of course, when Rinpoche brought up understanding, experience, and realization, these are the method of application of the Dharma. How can we experience something we don't understand? How can we realize something we don't experience? So in order to really tame the mind, we have to apply the Dharma. And what I've noticed, for myself, in all these years I've been practicing, is that when I apply the Dharma, it is 100% certain I can change. It is 100% certain I can give up any negative habit. I know I can. But sometimes I don't want to apply the Dharma. Or sometimes I'm refusing to apply the Dharma. Or sometimes I'm afraid to apply the Dharma. There's, all kinds of reasons I don't do it, but if I do it, it works. So, taming the mind. So that would be, Rinpoche was also brought up the idea of living spiritually. So I think taming the mind is really the essence of living spiritually. If we're applying the Dharma, we're living spiritually. And why does it matter? What we're doing in our everyday life. If we're thinking about the time of death and spiritual death, then why does it matter what we're doing in our everyday life? Well, it matters because whatever we're doing in our everyday life is what we're going to do when we're facing the moment of death. In our everyday life, if we're feeling a lot of fear, if we're getting involved in a lot of strong emotions, if we're acting out strong emotional patterns, we're going to do that when we're facing the moment of death. It's illogical to think we could do anything else, right? And especially at the moment of death, we're different than we are now. Right now, at least we have some kind of strength of mind. Our mind, our mental faculties are all put together, but when we're dying, for better or worse, our mental faculties are degrading. So whatever habits we have now are going to come up even more effortlessly. We're not going to be able to push them down at all. They're just going to come up. So if we spend a lifetime being angry, we're going to be angry at the moment of death. If we spend a lifetime being competitive or jealous or resentful or whatever it is, that's what we're going to feel when we're dying, and that is going to be the imprint that we carry with us into the Bardo state, into the future lifetimes if you believe in those things. So it's important to think about what we're doing during our life, because it is going to be what we experience when we die. Another thing that Rinpoche brings up often is, what if we're an on and off practitioner? That's the thing where when Rinpoche asks people, how long have you been practicing Dharma? So someone will say, 20 years on and off. But if you're an on and off practitioner, it's good to think, am I really practicing? Or maybe think, if I'm practicing on and off, how much does that benefit me when I'm facing death? And we have to be really pragmatic and think about all these things because we're making these decisions. We're actually planning the course of our spiritual lives, and we are going to face death and dying. And then at that time, we're just going to reap whatever we sow. So there's no one to blame. There's no one to think I would have done that if all these other things hadn't happened. It was our choice. Whatever we do is our choice, and it's an empowering thing, and it's also difficult. We have to take a lot of responsibility for ourselves. So it's good always to think about, Rinpoche says when he talks about karma, he says you can ascertain who you've been in the past and you can predict who you'll be in the future, right? Because however you are right now, there's a really good chance that's how you were before. Because that's what we do as human beings, right? We just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. If we had a terrible habit right now, that habit didn't come from nowhere. Just like Rinpoche said, when you're born and you scream in anger, right? That habit of screaming in anger is coming from, all of the past emotional karma that you've collected. So however you are right now, that's a prediction of how you're going to be in the future. And so that's a wonderful thing. You can think to yourself, I don't like how I am right now, so I'm really going to invest in changing it, because then I know that when I project forward to the future, I'm going to be different, and I'm going to be happier with that person that I became. I'm going to be happy with the effort that I made. I'm going to be happy with how I spent my life, and with how I developed my spiritual life. But with taming the mind, the thing that we don't get to do is blame other people for what's happening. Because it's our choice. Of course, when we predict forward to who we're going to be in the future, we just don't have the opportunity to say, everything for me is going to go, I'm going to turn out like this unless this person takes that away from me. That doesn't work. If we're practicing the Dharma, we just have to practice the Dharma no matter what. We have to commit. Because all kinds of unwanted things are going to happen. And there's nothing we can do about them. And we just have to accept. That's what it means to, apply the Dharma, no matter what. So I think thinking about the new patterns that we'd like to develop as practitioners is a really good focus for thinking about how do I want to spend the rest of my life. We don't know how long the rest of our life is, but if we put energy into thinking about the new patterns we want to develop and then actually work on developing those, I think it would be something that I would feel like I didn't look back on regret with my life. And I would think I did what I could. I really thought about the kind of person that I wanted to become, the kind of practitioner I wanted to become, and then I did. I tried. I did my best. I put in as much energy as I could. So when we reflect on the teachings of dying, the reality of death, these are the kinds of ways that we can mature ourselves as practitioners. Instead of thinking someone else is going to take care of it for us, or someone else is going to interfere and we're not going to be able to do something, we can learn to really take that responsibility to mature ourselves. And I think that's kind of that's a nice thing for Americans to think. I can do that. We can't do it by ourselves. We can't do it without a Lama. We can't do it without the Dharma. But it is something that we can do. We're all capable of doing.
So we'll let you guys ask their questions after I finish this. But the thing is, in the West, this is the impression I have. When people talk about Dharma, it's almost like taking a drug. Just liberate immediately on that spot. It's just so kind of New Age. It's like that. When you apply the Dharma, it's a little bit simple because you have to see your junky things inside of you. But if we are not frustrated with ourselves and not blaming ourselves and keep trying and applying the Dharma, and slowly you will see a light and a joy and a peace. You will find it. It takes maybe a number of years to make that effort. So I do not blame. Normally, we Dharma practitioners do not want to practice seriously. It's hard to let go of ourselves and see ourselves, the weakness sides that we have, flaws that we have. It's hard to see it. It's hard to accept it. But if we do not just blaming and keep working on the Dharma, applying the Dharma as a Dharma, then when you started to feel the peace and happiness based on the path of the Dharma, then that's what I call living spiritual. And that really helps us to facing any changes in this life, before that, after that. While we are healthy, no illness, it helps us to be really compassionate and really skillful. And even when we have no idea what kind of illness we end up. But even if we get some serious illness, but still the power of the Dharma, the way we face it, the way we use that difficult situation is really different. So therefore, this is some kind of like an introduction for this program this week, and just think, and if it makes sense, keep it, cherish it, and try to apply the Dharma. If it doesn't make sense, do not need to worry about it. So we have some minutes, and maybe you want to ask some questions, and I will let you ask questions. I want you to say something.
How long have you been practicing?
Me? It's scary, you don't want to hear it. Since I was a kid, so I connected with Buddhism, of course. No, I wouldn't say I practiced all those years, but almost I would say almost 40 years of connecting the Dharma and trying to develop being myself as a spiritual practitioner and as a spiritual teacher. But I would say I intensively applying and practicing Dharma maybe 30 years. Do you have a question? That's the question you have? Yeah? How old are you?
15.
50. Wonderful. All right.
Rinpoche and Allison, thank you very much. I work in hospice with people who are at the end of their life and actively dying. And when I contemplate my own death, I tend to have a very romantic notion about having a very long life, living to old age, and dying very comfortably and peacefully in my own home, in my bed, surrounded by my family. But that is not, there is absolutely no guarantee that that is how it will be. And oftentimes I get to see very tragic deaths, or very unexpected deaths, or deaths that are very much filled with suffering because there are deaths of children, or young people, or people with young children. How can we practice in such a way that we are prepared for that kind of death, and not just for a death that is ideal or picture perfect? What is the advice that you would provide?
You're saying like losing someone?
Yes, or
just like you die like unexpected.
Yes, facing a death that is unexpected, or that is the result of a violent crime, or that is a very tragic and sorrowful sort of death.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the reason Tibetan Buddhists always encourage to practice, never late, but never earlier. Always encourage to be ready, to be prepared. Whatever circumstances that takes away your life or your loved one's life, you need to be prepared how to face that situation. So it's not easy, you know. When you lose someone you were not expecting, that's coming. It's not easy. But I can guarantee you, if we really apply the Dharma, then that situation help you want more apply the Dharma and improve the Dharma practice. So I think we have no idea what circumstances is going to take away our lives. May die car accident, may brain crash, may die the way you want. But this karma is hard to predict. So whatever karma we accumulated in our previous lives, accordance with that karma, the way we die. So we have no idea how we die and what is the cause. But I don't think that's not going to be the obstacle. If we will be ready, if we can mingle the Dharma with our heart, if we can embody the essence of Dharma, we're ready. It's just like people who guard around the big swimming pools or the lifeguards. They're ready any second. Or if you are really good swimmer and something happened while you're on the boat, and you're ready when you're sinking into the ocean, and you know what things that help you to get the surface of the ocean. So that's kind of skills we need to develop to be prepared. So I always say, people say like, okay, Rinpoche, you're right. If I practice like this way, if I die this way, maybe I can connect to the Dharma. But if I die sadly, yeah, maybe that moment, you may not have those like dissolutions of 5 elements because you don't have enough time if it's car accident. But a minute, you're out of breath ceases. And when you're waking up from that, and you're ready. You realize where you are, you realize what's happening. It's like a dream state. If we can realize when we have having a nightmare, and if we're realizing we're having that kind of like a scary dream, and oh, okay, dream, yes. I'm not dying, I'm not losing my loved ones, I'm just having this dream, and immediately that liberates. It's the same way. If we're ready, if we're embodying the meaning of the Dharma, be ready, whatever is happening, if we're ready. The cause of the death is not going to be a big obstacle for facing death and life. I wouldn't say there's no obstacle, but if we are prepared, that the way we die is not the obstacle.
Thank you.
Do you have something else?
Well, I just had the thought, we can, in the moment, like say something tragic happened, we were hit by a car or something, in that moment, I don't know that there's anything that we can do to predict or prepare for that specific experience, but I think that meditating on impermanence is a really powerful thing to do. Because I know that Rinpoche will teach on this tomorrow, but if we're constantly reflecting on the impermanent nature of life, I think there is a sense in which we feel not necessarily ready, like, I'm okay if I die, but like that death could actually come. And I do think that there would be some benefit to that. I think that there would be less emotional shock, so to speak, for ourselves to you know, it says like when we're in the body state, like once we separate from our body, there's a sense in which the consciousness realizes that you died, and then that's a huge amount of excruciating suffering for the consciousness in the body state to realize that it's lost the body. So I do think that when we think about it that way, and we think about the strong attachment that we have to this body, that even though reflecting on impermanence deeply wouldn't liberate us in that moment, it doesn't have the ability to do that, I still think there would be the benefit to that training for the consciousness's like later states of mind, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes, what's your name?
My name is Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
Rinpoche, Allison, thank you so much for everything you said so far tonight. The question that is coming up for me is, before I came to learn about the Dharma, surely I harmed many people in this life. So one of my fears is, are those regrets going to start coming up for me? I mean, sometimes now or at the end of life. So I do some purification practice. Surely there's other things I can do, but maybe that can, in my mind, that's part of the preparation for preparing for death, but what does that mean? To
It's
prepare?
a really good question. It's not just this lifetime. We harmed so many beings in our previous lifetimes. Otherwise, why we are here still? It's the 21st century. It's a lot of a scary century. But there's a good thing. We're connected to that. So that means we did something good. There's a hope. So I suggest having regret from Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. It's not a bad thing. But do not let yourself to develop that thing about the guilt. It's not healthy. And not identifying with it. So the unique quality of Vajrayana Buddhism is we work on purification. We can't fast. We should let it go. Until you are not letting go of that fear, that comes along. So whenever that comes along, use that as a good condition to be more diligent on the path of the Dharma. Work on more purification. And then when you finish, do the purification, not just to focus on yourself. Oh, I have done this. I was a terrible person. Connect with others who also were terrible. Use the purification for all of you. You know? That then purification practice turns into bodhicitta practice. Not just you're like completely separating yourself from others. I'm a bad person, I have done this, and then look around. There are many people worse than you or so. But many people are same. Or many people are a little bit better, a little bit less worse. But if you use the purification practice as like a bodhicitta practice and pray and use that to purify all the beings who have done the same thing as you have done, and use that, you are all. Then at one point you start to lose that anxiety and anxious feelings or the regret. Then that helps you to release them. Then slowly that fear is going to be gone. Then that means when death comes, you won't have that fear. But otherwise, this is like a Western cultural way of thinking, like clinging on that guilt. I'm a bad person. Then, when you're dying, that bad person is there, and then you cannot be bad. and you're just carrying that pattern for the death, after the death, in the next life. So the unique thing of Tibetan Buddhism is we really work on purification and work on merit. So you did accumulate merit, therefore you're here. And wanting to develop yourself, improving yourself, and not making those mistakes over and over again. So you always need to learn, okay, which side is positive? Oh yeah, I haven't done this, but I have this positive side, I should rejoice. And people who have done same as me, but they have not found this opportunity the way I found. So I accumulated some merit. So I pray this merit for others who have not found that kind of circumstances. So you can constantly using positive side of you as a condition to improve your bodhicitta. And also you can use that unhealthy side of yourself as a good condition to push you to practice the bodhicitta, to develop the compassion. And if you see someone is like doing stupid things that when you were young, you can understand, oh, okay, yeah, I have done that, and generate bodhicitta and generate compassion towards that being, instead of like, oh, what an awful person, you know, and what a bad person, instead of doing that. So this is the reason I think Buddha Dharma and the Tibetan Buddhism, we call Tibetan Buddhism Mahayana, you know. It's just a great vehicle. It has so many skills that help us to transform positive and negative qualities that we have. So if we really positive and think, I'm terrible at this moment, I'm drunk, I'm selfish, I'm really, really dumb. Then next moment you see the other side. You're seeing yourself, that is a positive side. You're seeing, oh, this is not something good that I should pursue. That is the positive side. So that's the way I think we can use Buddha Dharma, applying the Dharma as Dharma, then slowly help. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
I think when I think back to terrible things that I've done in the past, I can think of some, I've confessed them all to Rinpoche. I think mostly I find it really motivating to think about the certainty that I'll do the same thing again without intervening. So I already have that habit, I've created that habit, I've done it before, I saw myself do it, I'll do it again. You know, and then I use that as a lot of motivation to practice hard. And so I try to, I don't think I really look back at those things I did. Not that I don't regret them, but I don't look back at them focusing on feeling bad about them. I look back at them focusing on how urgent it is to not be that person anymore. Because without practicing, I'm certainly going to be that person again, because I've already done it. And what I did in the past predicts what I'll be in the future, unless I'm doing something different. And everything we do is predictable. And even thinking about like samsara as being a wheel that just like we just keep repeating, and we're just all repeating. We've been repeating the same thing over and over again. And you know, we can't expect it to turn out differently if we don't practice. But I have a lot of devotion in the methods of purification, so I do feel a lot of conviction that if I just work at those purification methods, I am going to change. So maybe that's another aspect that we could talk about, is really working on the certainty of believing that those methods are going to change the way that they changed all the great spiritual masters before us.
Wonderful. Well, we have a couple of minutes, 3 minutes. So if you have a question, if you don't, tell us a joke. Yes.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do you practice Dharma in another religion?
去当跟你去了比较那你要不做一天踏实。
Can you like make it more clear?
Yes. Like
Mhm.
if you're going to church and praying to God,
Uh-huh.
how do you convert to those?
You mean like how can you convert Buddhism and your upbringing religious tradition? So I think this is something maybe it's a good thing that Allison should answer, and I will add something.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, so I think there's different levels, right? I think really, ultimately, the answer is you can't practice two religions at the same time. That's the honest answer, right? At some point, you have to choose. But I was raised Catholic. You know, I was raised going to church, and the church was meaningful to me in my younger life, and gave me a lot. And as I got older, just like I started to understand myself better, and I just realized this isn't the right way for me to develop myself spiritually. I'm not connecting. You know, maybe it doesn't feel right to me, but I'm a really spiritual person. I don't feel like I ever gave up like the love I have for Catholicism. I have a lot of really good memories. I'm not a person who's jaded about the religion I had when I was growing up. I have a lot of really good feelings towards it. It's just that, you know, I examined the Dharma and I examined the way that practice would develop me, and it just worked better for me. But I never went through a feeling of negativity. And I don't think there's any particular way that anybody goes through that experience, but I certainly don't think ever having that negativity is necessary. I think we can always feel gratitude and love for the things that have helped us in our lives. And then maybe we can just feel like that's just not like the right thing for me right now, you know? But I think ultimately we do have to choose. But there's like a lot of different things. I mean, like the Dalai Lama teaches, you know, unless you're really sure that you want to be a Buddhist, you shouldn't give up the religion of your childhood, but you can still like work on the tools of compassion that Buddhism teaches. And that works for some people, right? But if you're really talking about like taming the mind and practicing Dharma seriously the way we were tonight, like that won't work. So you kind of have to, I think, just come to your own understanding of what your goal is. And then make that decision for yourself. I mean, I don't think anybody can tell you, but I feel really sad when people are angry or dislike their religious upbringing. I feel really sad about that because I feel like religion gives us a lot. You know, it teaches us a lot, and it teaches us how to be with people and how to have community and love people, and that's a pretty great thing. So I'm sure Rinpoche has more to say, but I just definitely went through that myself.
I have not. But I'm being honest, I truly respect Christian and Catholic and any other religious traditions truly applying the love and compassion towards others. So I think you're young. I don't think you need to just make yourself a conflict, tearing yourself two parts. So the low genre, like mind training, you can use it as a Christian practice. You know, you are improving your mind. You are really bringing the warmth into your heart to help others, not judging others good or bad, that good person, that bad person, having compassion towards all beings. So vision is bigger. You know, Buddhism, we talk about all beings, not just human beings. And at a certain point, when your mind and intellectual mind, everything is maturing, you should use that intellectual mind. What it really makes sense, you know? And in this past, future, enlightenment, all these things in Buddhism talk, it doesn't make sense. You need to find that certainty inside of you, in your heart. What this thing about karma, what Buddhism taught, this makes sense. You know, at one point, then maybe everything will make sense. Then you can think, okay, yeah, not like, okay, you're not giving up your previous spiritual tradition. Gain that respect. As His Holiness Dalai Lama always said, having respect in all religious tradition. And we're sharing one common thing. Talking about compassion. How to love others. You know? But then if you really truly believe in karma, past, future lives, Buddhahood, then you will be able to pick up that path and want to really develop the way Buddhism taught.